What's going on, investors? Welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I want to play a clip from an interview that Simon Barnett, the top analyst whenever it comes to genomics in the Ark ETF fund. So he had an interview with Dave Lee, somebody that I follow his channel on YouTube. So he made mention of several things about Pac Bio, Illumina, the genomic sector, Ultimate Genomics, and so on and so forth. So I want us to listen to what he has to say about this, because we are also into genomics and we can learn one or two things from his opinion about this sector. And also, let me just first of all make it clear that he did not made mention of Bionano Genomics or anything like that. They always try as much as possible not to mention Bionano Genomics. Okay, so he didn't say anything about BNGO, so you guys shouldn't think this is about Bionano Genomics. No, but of course, I want to first of all talk about BNGO, because today was a very good day. The share price of BNGO closed 5.81%, and it closed at 2.55 US dollars. Okay, for the first time since God knows when. Look at that, 1 month. Let's take a look at 6 months. So the last time we were at this level was back in April, 4th of April. That was when the price started to go down, massively, all the way down to about 1.15 US dollars. Okay, so since April we haven't even gone as high as this. So this is a very good, I mean, it's very good for BNG. Okay, year to date, you guys can see we started the year around 3 US dollars, and we are gradually approaching 3 US dollars. In my opinion, this looks like a breakout right here. Okay, so let's see what's gonna happen going forward. And also, my price target of for Bionano Genomics at the end of this year is 3 US dollars. I made a poll on Twitter, so you guys can easily go there and vote. And I said, can BNGO meet my end of year price target? 3 points is just 5 cents, a little bit higher than 3 US dollars. So so far 60 people have voted, and 88.3% right now say yes, and about 11.7% say no. So of course we are closer to 3 US dollars more than ever, because we have about 70% left to rally to meet my end of year target. We still have about 4 or 5 months before the year is over, so that's a very good one. Now Bionano Genomics, that is that about BNGO. Let's take a look at what Dave Lee had what he had to say. Okay, the question that Dave Lee asked Simon Barnett from Ark Invest. Of course, this is a 2 hours video, but I don't want to show you guys everything, because this is not my content. So big shout out to Dave Lee for sharing this video with us. So yeah, now we are not going to watch everything. I just want to I want us to listen to some parts that I think it's very similar to Bionano Genomics. Okay, for example, why it took so long for sequencing. No, we don't need this. Short read versus long read sequencing. So here Simon spoke about the differences between short read versus long read sequencing. Okay, and he spoke a little bit about Illumina and Pac Bio and 10x Oxford Nanopore. And here, oh sorry, you guys cannot see you cannot see it. I have to reduce it. So here they spoke about short read, and right here I'm going to move this up a little bit. This is strange. Let me do it like this. Okay, so here he spoke about short read versus long read DNA sequencing, and then he spoke about downsides of Pac Bio and nanopause approach. And then they spoke about Ultimate Genomics. I made a video already about Ultimate Genomics, and you need to listen to what Simon has to say about Ultimate Genomics, and also he spoke about Illumina. So those are the parts that we are just going to watch. We're going to start from short read versus long read sequencing, and then we are going to watch the downside of Pac Bio versus Nano, because Dave asked Simon a very important question at on this part of the video. He asked a very, very, very important question about Pac Bio, why Pac Bio has been going down, and so on and so forth. So I want you guys to listen to that part. So let's get to it.
Short read versus long read. So it seems like the advent of long read, data sequencing has led to the ability, right, for us to see the whole genome, parts that we were unable to access. So what is the difference between short read and long read, and what enabled, right, the advent of long read?
So imagine 15 years ago when there was no necessarily converging idea around how to sequence DNA. Like we talked about this, flow cell, sort of flow the DNA in, lock it down and read it optically. Like 15 years ago, we didn't necessarily know that that was going to be the technology that took us to, the sub-$1,000 genome. So it was a little bit more ambiguous back then. And so what was happening is different research groups were trying to figure out what is the best system for sequencing DNA, right? And so just imagine that like choices made 15 years ago on how to actually build these sensors diverged. So these are actually under the hood, extremely different sensors. So let me quickly kind of get into the way that Pac Bio does it, and then I can talk about Nanopore because they're both, amazing but unique technologies. So with Pac Bio, you have similar steps on the front end where you're breaking DNA up, but again, instead of 200 letters, you're doing 25,000 or something like that. So bigger fragments, bigger jigsaw puzzle pieces. And instead of a glass flow cell where you're putting linear molecules and anchoring them, what Pac Bio uses is a semiconductor-based platform. So in their semiconductors, you have a surface that is, I believe, currently made of aluminum, and you have these tiny little holes that are drilled into them in a uniform array, millions of these things. And each one, these holes are so tiny. Like, let me put this into a sense of scale for people. The ratio of a 1 liter bottle of water to the size of one of these little holes, which they're called waveguides, is the same ratio as that 1 liter of bottle of water to all of the water on the planet, right? So we're talking about 10 to the negative 20 nanometers, right? Or meters, something like that. So extremely small. So Pac Bio's DNA is not a straight line, it's a circle. They take a 25,000 long circle and then they flow it and it anchors itself inside of that little hole. And then it spins in real time, still using the same optical, laser fluorescent readout that you'd get like with the short read platform. The difference is that by anchoring the DNA inside of that tiny little hole, you're actually able to read DNA almost as fast as it's synthesized, in a much larger kind of biological system. So instead of, one base for every 5 minutes or so, it's multiple bases per second. So it's very fast, right? And you're able to read much longer molecules than you can, in a flow cell system. And one of the reasons for that is in a flow cell, it's very likely when you get past about 300 letters long that the strands get out of what's called out of phase, where some of them are flashing green and some of them are flashing blue with the same pixel. So the pixel is getting wavelength overlap and it gets confused, right? It's like, is this blue? Is this green? I don't know. And then you start getting error. So you can't do that in a flow cell regime. After about 300 bases, you start getting into some trouble. But with a semiconductor, you can do tens of thousands of bases and with accuracy that's superior to the flow cell and with much more much longer reads. So that's Pac Bio. Nanopore is really interesting and fun to talk about too. So the way Nanopore does it, they threw the camera and the glowing bases out completely. What they decided to do was literally create a microscopic channel that DNA molecules will zip through like this. And the way that you get them to do that is you expose them to current, right? So you have positive and negative charge. And because DNA is negatively charged and has its own energetics, you can rifle it through the pore, right? And this is oversimplifying it a bit, but essentially the way that it's reading the system is by a voltage drop, right? Or a current drop rather. And so you're measuring these, depending on if it's an A or a T or a G or a C, you get a different characteristic voltage or current change. And that helps your computer understand, okay, well, is it, what letter is it? So on the back end, Nanopore uses a lot of deep learning techniques to process what are called squigglegrams. And you can look at them, they actually look like long squiggles. And they leverage a ton of deep learning to be able to figure out, okay, well, what was an A, what was a T, what was a G, what was a C? So, the cool thing about this is Nanopore devices are handheld, right? Some of them are. So you can take a sequencer that's the size of your smartphone into the middle of the jungle and take a sample out, put it through the system. And if you've got a sufficiently powerful computer, you can even start doing informatics in the field, right? So that's the advantage of being able to get rid of the camera, the optics, and those reagents, right?
Let's talk about the downsides of Pac Bio and Nanopore's approach. So with Pac Bio, it sounds great, long read sequencing, but right now, I was looking at their revenue, and it seems like year over year Q1 revenue is only up from 29 million to 33 million. So it doesn't look like they're growing like by leaps and bounds every year. So it doesn't seem like their machines are completely flying off the shelf. So what's going on here? Why, is there some type of downside or cons to their Pac Bio's approach?
So the short answer is yes. There are pros and cons for every sequencing approach. The thing to understand, though, about Nanopore, Pac Bio, and Illumina's much older, dominant market share because short read sequencing was the one that took off the most in terms of cost and scalability. So the term for scalability is throughput. How much DNA can you crank out of a machine per day, right? Pac Bio and Nanopore have both been definitely not languishing. It's just a lot harder of a problem, frankly, from an engineering standpoint. And they didn't have, the huge influx of R&D capital that Illumina got by virtue of scaling its business quickly. So the technologies have been a little bit, kind of living in the shadow on a price point and throughput basis. So, PacBio specifically, semiconductors are a little bit more expensive to manufacture than flow cells. They're not as high throughput. There are literal physical constraints that you don't.
So, a quick thing. Let me quickly remind you guys that Bionano Genomics is also using the flow cells technology. Okay, and as you guys can hear from Simon, PacBio is using semiconductor. I mean, I think he is trying to refer to Illumina whenever he mentions flow cells, because I think Illumina is also using flow cells just like Bionano Genomics. So, yeah, let's continue.
Don't necessarily have on a flow cell system. So obviously there are advantages, like we've been talking about with long molecules, but it's been the scalability and the cost that has been historically the challenge. Now, PacBio is at a really interesting standpoint insofar as, within the next 12 to 18 months, we think that their next sensor that comes out will be roughly as cheap or cheaper than short read for many applications.
Okay, so Simon has been mentioning this next, technology coming out from PacBio. Since last year, he has been talking about how PacBio is going to, come up with a new technology, a new device that is going to be cheaper, faster, and of course be able to sequence DNA in the millions of base pairs, just like Bionano Genomics mapping, genomes for structural variation. So now he's mentioning it again that they believe in the next 18 months or 2 years or so that PacBio is going to come up with a device that is going to be, wonder or God knows what. I think he still believes in PacBio. And just like he already said, like Dave asked Simon why PacBio revenue is not growing. Okay, they reported 28 million US dollars. Then they just most recently reported like 31 or so million US dollars. So you guys can see that the growth is not really there compared to Bionano Genomics that they have been breaking record after record in terms of total revenue. Bionano Genomics have been presenting, reporting record breaking revenue almost every quarter. You guys can already tell from my most recent video. I also shared with you guys the projection of Bionano Genomics revenue, how it has been growing. Okay, so that is it. PacBio is still there, guys. Now let's continue.
And the throughput concern we think is kind of going away, right? So they're a generation behind on a platform standpoint. Now, from a business standpoint, though, it was really interesting, right? Because Illumina was actually trying to buy PacBio in 2018, right? So they put a bid out, $1.2 billion. The FTC said no, on the grounds that it was too much of concentration of the market. And so that deal ended up passing. Since that time, PacBio has raised more than $1 billion in capital. They've made a few really important technological breakthroughs that are going to be coming to market, we believe within the next 12 months.
Now, let me try to make this clear. Pac Bio got investment. They got money, fundings from SoftBank and almost $1 billion. But the fact of the matter is, Pac Bio, that is more or less like a loan. They need to pay that money back. Okay, so Pac Bio, like I made a tweet a couple of days ago that I believe Pac Bio is going to dilute shares any moment from now because they are running out of money. If you want to compare them to Bionano Genomics still has like 1.5 to 2 years before they run out of the 180 something million US dollars that they presently have in cash, according to their most recent earnings results. Okay, report. Now, Pac Bio, on the other hand, in my opinion, in couple of maybe in two or three quarters maximum, first quarter of next year, I believe Pac Bio is going to be diluting shares. Okay, that is what I believe. They are going to be diluting shares, or if not, they could run out of money right now. And if you take a look at their revenue, it's not even growing like Ark Invest, I've been preaching Pac Bio to be. Okay, Pac Bio revenue should be literally, at least if they report 28 million US dollars, they should be reporting like maybe closer to 40 million US dollars. Okay, not 31. So that is that about that. And also, Pac Bio is in debt. They are in debt. Okay, you can go and check it out on the internet. Just a quick Google is going to show you how deep in debt Pac Bio is right now.
On the long read side of the house, that we think, again, are going to take care of those throughput and cost concerns and really allow the technology to scale in ways that it hasn't beforehand. The other thing to consider is leadership. This company, after that deal breakup, was kind of thinking, okay, well, where do we go from here? We need excellent leadership to be able to take this technology, which has always been great, but it's not a scenario where if you build it, they will come, right? You need a really excellent management. And so I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I believe they've taken something like 20 or 30 executives and managers from other sequencing companies, including Illumina. The current CEO and COO of Pac Bio both were chief commercial and CFO of Illumina. So they've been taking a lot of talent, people who are seasoned veterans in the space and who have frankly been competing with Pac Bio from the other team. Who are really supercharging this, and we think that they're right at the cusp of really breaking into important clinical markets. And that's what happens with these businesses. They have academic and research interest, but eventually you've got to scale to clinical because that's where the money is. To that end, Pac Bio signed a deal with one of the largest sequencing labs in the world, Invitae, to begin scaling up the technology in a clinical, whole genome sequencing context. So, the deal making side, getting the management, it's really a situation where the stars are aligning. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is,
I think the only stars aligning for Pac Bio is how they are going to run the company down. Guys, I don't know why Simon is, they signed a deal with Invitae last year, I believe, but still I don't see how that has been helping Pac Bio so far, because we still have the likes of Ultima Genomics coming. Competition is coming in hot, okay, in the sequencing sector. In comparison to optical genome mapping, Bionano Genomics, competition in the sequencing sector is very, very hot. It's very intense. Okay, we have the likes of Ultima Genomics coming in with, he's still going to talk about Ultima Genomics coming in with $100, to sequence a DNA. In comparison to Pac Bio with over $1,000, I believe, to sequence a DNA. So I don't know why Simon is so optimistic still about Pac Bio. And of course, Ark Invest, last week after Pac Bio reported their losses, okay, Ark Invest bought another hundreds of thousands of shares of Pacific Bioscience of California.
It's very difficult to model, especially for capital intensive kind of hardware tools businesses through the pandemic, right? And one of the reasons for that is, as you can imagine, COVID disruptions with things like NIH budgeting, which slows down purchasing, lab closures, meaning scientists are not at the bench doing their work. So it is a little tricky to model through the pandemic. That being said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've just put up 6 record-breaking quarters in a row on instrument placements. And just this last quarter, they signed a bulk order with the Broad Institute, the joint institute between Harvard and MIT, to essentially start doing population scale sequencing using their long read platform. So yeah, and Nanopore, is In a similar situation, I would say, in terms of, they're not at the scale of Illumina.
All right, before we finish this section, Simon spoke about the pandemic and how it has affected the industry in general. Okay, of course it also affected Bionano Genomics. During the shutdown, the lockdown, they couldn't go out there to laboratories and install their devices. But that is like 2 years ago, guys. I mean, this is 2022, and this interview of Simon is from last month. So I don't know why he's still mentioning how the pandemic affected their model of the progress of Pac Bio or something like that. I'm not really buying that.
They've got their own markets that they're going after, and they are doing that.
I think it was today, like about some emoji eyes about Ultima. Was it genomics, or what is that a sequencing startup?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So Ultima was one of these that was working in stealth for about half a decade. And, they did a very nice unveiling, I think about 3 weeks ago, with the headline that they were going to deliver the $100 quote unquote genome with their first instrument, which is something that, it's a milestone Illumina has been chasing for, a decade plus, right? We could get into it, but I'm sure there's a whole argument to be made around whether or not they could do it now by lowering prices, or if there's actually a technological obstacle to be overcome. Regardless, because it really doesn't matter, prices are going to start coming down now, right? If not solely for the reason that a diagnostics lab can go to Illumina and say, hey, I'm going to switch vendors unless you lower my prices, right? Because now I have potentially a viable alternative.
All right, guys. So not to waste your time on Ultima Genomics, I already made a video about it. They are coming up with a new technology, okay, and UG100. That is the name of their device, and they claim to have a technology that can sequence DNA for just $100. So Simon in this section is just talking about the technology of Ultima Genomics, how it works, and so on and so forth. They are not using any consumables and so on and so forth. So that's why it's very cheap and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at why Ark Invest dumped Illumina. Simon is going to talk about it here, and then we can end the video. It's like about 3 minutes or so. So let's check it out.
One question about Illumina. In my personal kind of just shallow research, I've just done, a few glimpses at their annual reports over the years and quarterly reports, but it seems like, the culture, and this is my personal opinion, the culture is a bit more sales focused. It's like a very developed, mature organization, right? Focused on revenue. They've got their core products. I personally just wasn't that impressed by kind of, I don't know, the pace of innovation or I felt like perhaps a lack of a startup culture in that company. But would you say, what's going on in terms of patents? Does Illumina, being such a big player, do they inhibit innovation in that field at all by holding patents, by threatening lawsuits or anything like that? Like what's been your observation kind of in that area?
Yeah. And there was a lot to unpack there, so please cut me off if I missed something. But to your point, absolutely. For the past 15 years or so, they've used, their patent estate and litigation to essentially block competition. In fact, there are still lawsuits ongoing. One of the biggest ones, which was recently overturned, was with a company called BGI, the Beijing Genomics Institute, which is kind of the China homegrown Illumina in many ways. And so for a long time, they've been trying to sell their instruments in the United States. And time after time, Illumina has been able to successfully thwart their ability to sell into the US. Now, several key patents have since expired that are enabling BGI to begin to sell in the US later this summer. So the extent to which Illumina is able to continue to litigate and block competition is, I think, vanishing rapidly, if not already entirely deteriorated. Now, that doesn't mean they won't do it, because they have a lot of money and the resources to stall competition, especially nascent competition that doesn't have the balance sheet to be able to weather that storm. So far, though, you have to understand a lot of the people that are at these other sequencing companies, a lot of them come from Illumina, and many of them understand the patent landscape well. And so, to our knowledge, many of them have innovated enough to circumvent any possibility of litigation. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but I think that the patent thing is pretty much over. Now, Nanopore and Pac Bio don't really need to worry about this because their sensors, again, are so different that there's not, really much to do there anyway. So that's absolutely been the case. And on innovation, I mean, look, we had Illumina as a core position for many years, certainly before I got to Ark in 2018. This is all public information. We exited the position, I believe, following the announcement that they were going to acquire a company called Grail that they had actually spun off some years earlier. And without getting too much into Grail, I wanted to just generally make the statement that that acquisition for us was the absolute confirmation that Illumina was willing to continue competing with its own customers. And what I mean by that is, Grail is a diagnostics or a cancer screening business, right? And many of Illumina's own largest companies do that as well. So you can see, this issue where I may not want to subsidize my own competition, right? Right. So that's kind of the dynamic that we were concerned about, especially because we knew that viable alternatives were brewing. And again, last week, Ultima and Exact announced last week, but Invitae, like I already mentioned, has actually been actively investing in getting their system switched over, at least for some applications, to Pac Bio. So we viewed that as a risk, right? And we put Illumina through the same kind of rigorous, evaluation of people management, culture, technology, leadership, the 5-year valuation. And at the time, we were just looking at it from the perspective of, key account risk, competing with customers, the price tag that they actually paid for Grail compared to what we felt like it was worth. Is a combination.
All right, guys. So that is it. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section, like always. Okay, and as you guys can see, Simon didn't even talk about. He didn't even mention Bionano Genomics once. Meanwhile, he was mentioning almost every company in the genomic sector. BTI from China, or what is it called? Illumina, Pac Bio, Oxford Nanopore, 10x Genomics. He mentioned everything. Grail, Ultima Genomics, but he didn't talk about Bionano Genomics. So, as time goes on, most of all these people that, for example, this video got about 40,000 views. Okay, I believe more than that. I believe most of this, the viewers of this, video, the audience, for sure, maybe they went to Google and search for, genomic sector, hot stocks. Maybe they found Bionano Genomics, because there is a possibility that this video from Dave somehow helped BNGO to even rally, okay, in the past days, because this was, from 9th of July, I believe. That was when he posted this video. So that's it, guys. So we are going to see in the next video. See you guys in the next one. I'm your boy Dayo. This is Frunkla. Ciao, ciao. It's almost 1 a.m. right now in Germany.